Hotep, Hotep, Hotep. ATM Hotep, welcome in peace. This is your brother Wujau Min Ib Iri Ma'at, and I am welcoming you to the Seshu Ma'ani Medew Netcher YouTube channel. And I'll be one of the panelists tonight, along with
Hotep, Hotepu Abedi. I am definitely on a panel today and looking forward to the discussion. So, yeah. But before we start, just wondering actually, since we haven't been active for a while, I was actually wondering while the music was playing, it would be interesting to know what most of our, study partners, or like we say, people on the channel that have always been kicking with us, what they've been doing like during those months, like what kind of text they were reading and all that stuff while we were away. So if you're listening to this, just let us know in the chat. I think that would be interesting because sometimes you need kind of like study partners around you to kind of inspire you to kind of get in into the session, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just let us know. That would be interesting.
all right, all right. So, just wanted to greet everyone and also acknowledge that our good brother Asari Motep is live, and he's been live for a while. And so I'm not sure exactly when he's gonna wrap up. Probably soon. Um, just thinking of the time that he's already been live, and maybe people can just treat our stream here as a after party, or this is the after party of his stream, because we're not talking about the exact same things, but not tonight. But it's just interesting nevertheless, and it's along the same lines though, just not the exact same thing. All right, so but we didn't want to start too late. It's 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we're just gonna have a nice discussion and basically do what we did the other night. For those who don't know, make sure you first of all make sure you definitely subscribe to the channel, and not just subscribe, but hit the bell and click notifications, all notifications, because if you've been watching us for any time, you know that we will go live as a out the blue, as a drive by. We rarely pre-announce ahead of time that we'll go live, even though, and I say that as if I'm bragging about it, but we need to kind of warn people that we're going to go live. But sometimes that's hard because the topics that we, first of all, it's kind of hard to get everybody together at the same time at a moment's notice. But the topics that we cover are, most of them are truly ad hoc. People will inbox me, email me, or someone else on the panel, and then want questions answered. And what I do, instead of answering it privately just for that one person, I I want to answer it, so that other people can gain something from it. We can all be a part of the discussion. I don't want to privatize everything. So that's kind of the inspiration for why we pop up live sometimes. All right. So again, good brother Asar Motep is live right now, and he's speaking about the critiques against the Dogon and things like that. So I guess as he wraps up, maybe people who still have time and want to hang out, they'll make their way on over to the channel. So I put the panel link into the chat early. So if you see the panel link, join the panel. That's the link. So if you're interested in joining the panel, if you have questions, you want to share anything based on what we discuss, by all means do so. All right, you're welcome to do so. All right, so without rambling on any further, our live is entitled "The Transformations of Ra," and so the other day we shared the story before creation and the story of creation. Just read two essays out of James P. Allen's Middle Egyptian Grammar textbook, And so that's on our channel. So definitely watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch that show. We had a discussion afterwards. So even though the show, when you click on it, it looks like it's long. I believe it looks like it's 3 hours. But what we shared is not 3 hours long. We had a discussion afterwards. And same thing tonight. So what we're going to talk about today or share with you all is the story of the transformations of Ra. And there's a book that scholars refer to. Actually, the book, it begins with this sentence. So that became the title of the book. It's called The Book of Knowing the Transformations of Ra and Overthrowing a Pep. All right. And let me just jump right in and share some things here. Give me 1 second. Share this on the screen. Okay. So this is the what has survived on papyrus. So the papyrus is Bremner Rhines papyrus. It's named after either the person who discovered it or acquired it, in some acquisition or whatever the case is. That's the names of papyri that you see at museums and things. The names of them usually will have the curator, not the curator necessarily, but the person who bought it, purchased it, acquired it by whatever means. And so this is the Bremner's Rhines papyrus, but it's labeled as BM, British Museum 10188. All right, so if you ever want to do further research on it, that's what this papyrus is. All right, and there are several pieces of text on it, on the whole roll. But as you may or may not know, when they store these papyrus to preserve them so they won't get any more damage than, through the elements and everything and age, they cut the papyrus into sheets and to preserve it, to lay it flat and to preserve it. So this papyrus is pretty lengthy, and so there are several stories on it. And this particular one, the Book of Knowing the Transformation of Ra and Overthrowing a Pep, is one of them. And so what you see here, and unfortunately, let's see, can I get my cursor over here? And yes, I can pull out my trusty arrow. All right. So this is the papyrus, a sheet of it. All right. Now, the beginning of the story, let me turn this the other way. The beginning of the story starts right here, okay, where this arrow is, this line here. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on this papyrus is written in what scholars call hieratic. All right. Now, without diving in, too deep and making this video too long, hieratic is the name that was coined by Clement of Alexandria. And during his time, and matter of fact, this was during, I believe it is the 2nd century AD, and I'm going off the top of my head, but it's definitely either 2nd century BC or 2nd century AD, where he visited Egypt and he witnessed what he would call priests writing in this type of style. And so he called it hieratic, for the Greek word hieraticus, which means priestly writing. Okay, and so that's the only reason why it received this name. It's a misnomer because this style of writing was not done only by priests. It was done all throughout Egypt's history. And it appears on the scene very close to the same time frame as the formal hieroglyphs, or what we refer to as Sesh, Medew, Netcher. And so when you actually do a study on the writing style, this writing style, we prefer to call it Simplified Sesh, Medew, Netcher, because it's the same as the formal pictorial glyphs, except it's written with a pen on a different surface, on papyri. And it saves time in writing. because the pen of the scribe doesn't have to leave the paper as much, and you don't have to carve in as many details. So we refer to it as simplified. And so what I have here on the screen is the formal glyph of the scarab beetle, Kepper. And so these arrows that I have coming from the beetle is pointing to the glyph, but written in what, again, scholars call hieratic. So this glyph right here is the scarab beetle. This glyph right here, same thing, scarab beetle. Glyph right here, scarab beetle. Again, scarab beetle. Again, scarab beetle, scarab beetle. So you'll see a lot of scarab beetles. Here's another one, right here. Here's another one, right here. Here's another one. Here's another one. So you see it all over this papyrus. Well, starting from the start of the story. This is the first time it appears within this story. Okay, this text. But you see a lot of Kepper, 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 Kepperu, Kepperi, and so on. And there's a reason for that. And so we're going to get into that. All right, so I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of a backdrop on what we're discussing. All right, and so we're going to read a translation. So we're going to read out of E.A. Wallace Budge's book, Egyptian Gods, where he translates this story. Now, he translates the whole story. We're not going to read the whole story. We're going to read the beginning and, and go through a couple of passages and stop at some point. But then we're going to give some commentary about it. All right. So, but this is the actual papyrus itself. And then we're going to just read from Budge's text. All right. So, and afterwards, like I said, if you want to join the panel now, that's perfectly fine. Or if you have questions, while we're sharing this, it's hard for me to pay attention to the chat. So if you have questions or things to share, if you can, reserve it until we finish reading, until we open it up a bit. All right. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. So I'm gonna share the book here, and hopefully y'all can see it. So let me know. It should be big. I mean, this is huge, magnified like 20 million times. You should be able to see this. Okay, so let me give you the resource, the source of Budge's text. So this is E.A. Wallace Budge's book, The Egyptian Gods, and I believe it's volume 2. It's a 2-volume series, and don't want to lose my spot. But before we finish tonight, I'll definitely let you know if it's volume 1 or volume 2. And this is from page 308. 308 forward. So if you have the book, you can turn to page 308, The Egyptian Gods by E.A. Wallace Budge. All right, and so we're just gonna read through it, and then we're gonna discuss, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna highlight some things and discuss it.
All right, so let's go ahead and just dig into it. So we're gonna start from the very first line, and this is Mejat. I know he is transliterated as Shat. This is Mejat, Neti, Rek, then you have Keperu, Nu, Ra. And so it's okay. Let's just the translation is the book of knowing the evolutions of Ra. So, and then go to the next line, and of overthrowing a pep. The words of Nebuchadnezzar, which he speak after he had come into being, or which he speak after he had come into being. I am he who came into being in the form of Khepera. I was or became the creator of what came into being, the creator of what came into being, into all being. After my coming into being, many, and let's get to a finish point. Many were the things which came into being, coming forth from my mouth. I don't know if I should stop there or continue reading. Okay. So, not existed heaven, not existed earth, not had been created the things of the earth and creeping things. In place that I raised them up from out of new, from a state of inactivity. Not found I a place I could stand, wherein I worked a charm upon my heart. I laid a foundation in Ma'ah, and I made at every attribute. I was alone. Not had I spit in the form of shoe, not had I emitted tefnut, not existed another who walked with me. I made a foundation in my heart, my own, and there came into being the multitudes of things which came into being, of the things which came into being, from out of the things which came into being, of bats, from out of the things which came into being, of their bats. I, even I, had union with my clenched hand. I joined myself in an embrace with my shadow. I poured seed into my mouth, into my own mouth. I sent forth issue in the form of shoe. I sent forth moisture in the form of tefnut, says my father. No. They make to be weak my eye behind them, because for the henty or double periods, they proceed from me after I became from God, one God's three. That is, from out of myself, I came into being in this earth. Were raised up, therefore, Shu and Tefnut in the inert watery mass wherein they were. Brought they to me my eye in their train. After, therefore, I had united my members, I wept on them and came into being, men and women, from the tears which came forth from my eye. And it raged against me after it came to find that I had made another in its place. I endowed it with the power which I had made. Having made to approach, therefore, its place in my face afterwards, therefore it ruleth earth this to its whole extent. Fall their moments or their or seasons upon their plants. I adored it with what it had taken possession in it. Yeah, maybe we should stop here.
All right, all right. So if you can, scroll back to the beginning of it. All right, so going back to the beginning. Now, I wanted it read in English because I don't want to turn this into this is definitely not enough time to turn this into a language lesson or anything like that. We can definitely do that, and we have done that on our channel. So go back in the archives, and you'll see that we cover a lot of different topics, but we touched on this before, and maybe I'll dig up the actual video where we discussed this before. But this is, we're going live now, discussing this as a series of discussions on the same topic, pretty much, which is centered around cosmology and creation. So as you heard, this sounds very much like a creation story, because it is. It's talking about the creation, the cosmogony, cosmology of how things came to be, how things came into being. And so when you read it, it sounds, familiar like other creation stories that you may have heard, even the biblical story, where the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep, and so on and so forth. And you hear this unfolding. It starts off with something, then it starts to unfold into other things. And so this is similar to that. And so coming back to the beginning, the title is The Book of Knowing the Evolutions or Transformations of Ra and Overthrowing a Pep. And so that's like the intro, letting you know that that this is what this text is about. So the key thing here is knowing the transformations or evolutions of Ra. And so that's the intent, to know. And this whole story puts these words into a deity. It says the words of Nebercher or Nebercher, that he spoke after, and you can scroll down. He had come into being. All right. And then it starts to go into the narration. And so it says, I am he who came into being. And what I want you to pay attention to is, especially if you saw our previous show, where we shared the story, we read from James P. Allen's book. This is the actual, one of the actual texts that James P. Allen was referring to in his summary, in the essay. And so I want you to notice that it says, I am he who came into being in the form of Khepri. Budge has Khepra here, or Khepri or Khepra. Then it says, I was or became the creator of what came into being. Keep going down. The creator of what came into being, of all of what came into being. After my coming into being, many were the things which came into being, coming forth from my mouth. Now, so what this is saying, so we have this entity. Now, mind you, this, if we were to give this a chronological time period, like a timeline, this is actually before creation. And a lot of other people talk about creation, from the point of creation, forward. But this is before creation. And so we're gonna get into that in a second. Notice that the mouth is involved. And then it's basically explaining or elaborating that nothing else existed, not heaven, not earth, none of that has been is in existence. And scroll down a bit. Not heaven, not earth itself, not anything on earth, none of the creeping things, none of that. All right. Then it says, I raised them from out of Nu. Now, we discussed Nu in a previous video. Nu is a deity that is metaphorized as water. And here it says, the primeval abyss of water, what Budge says. From a state of inactivity. The same deity speaking did not find a place where it could stand. Obviously, it couldn't be a place where you could stand because nothing existed. All right. Then it goes on to talk about the desire of this entity, the desire working a charm in his mind. It says heart, ib, and laying a plan or a foundation, and then starting to create every attribute of things. And then it reminds us that, hey, I'm alone. Nothing else exists. It's just me. Not even existence didn't even exist. Existence only exists when I came into existence. Then it goes on, and the two acts of things that occurred was to spit out Shu and emit Tefnut. But here in the story, he's saying that he didn't do that yet. So he's emphasizing that, listen, this is before Shu emanated from me, before Tefnut emanated from me, before I spat out Shu, before I emanated Tefnut. It's just me. I'm alone. So this is the emphasis. So it spends some time emphasizing the oneness of this entity. Nothing else existed. All right. And so nothing else helped him. He said no one else not existed any other who worked with him. Then it goes on, as Amicat read, to lay a foundation and plan, and then multitude of things started to unfold, starting with Shu and Tefnut. And then further down, you get into man or human, mankind coming about from the tears. So if you could scroll down to that part, I just want to highlight that, and then we're going to switch over. So in this portion here, um, the deity that's speaking says he cried, wept, Remy, and he wept over them, and then came into being or manifested. Or you see the word Keper there again, the Remich. And so this is where the ancient Egyptians get their name from, their national name from. When we say the ancient Egyptians are the Remich Ni Kemet, we're saying the people of Kemet. Remich means the people. And so right here is where they explain the concept of that name and where it comes from. They viewed themselves or humanity as coming from the tears of the deity. The word for crying or weeping is Remi. And so therefore Remi, there's a play on the word Remi, and you get the Remech. And it says, came into being men and women from the tears which came forth from my eye, and so on. All right. And we discussed this in videos prior, the Remich. And actually, we even have a T-shirt that shows and displays that, the Remich. All right. But what I want to do is give some commentary coming from. I'm gonna stop sharing this one a bit. All right. So what I want to do is I want to switch back over here, give a bit of commentary on that. So again, this is coming from this papyrus, BM 10188, or Bremner's Rhines papyrus, the Book of Knowing the Transformation of Ra and Overthrowing of Pep. All right, those are how you can reference it and look it up, do further research on it. But I want to kind of showcase the opening lines, the first few lines, and then I'm going to get into commentary by Dr. Theophilo Benga. And I encourage everyone to get Dr. Theophilo Benga's book called African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, 2780 to 330 BC. So here's the opening line. And in our style, we like to we deal with the language. We stress the importance of learning the language in some form or fashion, at least at a beginner's level, to really, really study and get to know the ancient Egyptians and the culture. Without it, you are handicapped, hands down. There's no way around it. When you're studying culture anthropology, the various different cultures on the planet, there's a must that you have to study the language of the people in whose culture that you're studying. Without it, you'll be handicapped, and you're only a spectator, sitting on the sidelines. You're not even in a car. You're not even driving shotgun. All right. So, in that spirit, I just want to highlight some of the things in the hieratic. And so, what scholars normally do is they take the hieratic papyri, they transcribe it into the formal glyphs, because there's more people who learn the formal hieroglyphs or Sesh, Medew, Netcher than will read what we call the simplified Sesh, Medew, Netcher, or what they refer to as hieratic. So in the process of learning the language and the writing system, formal hieroglyphs, the hieroglyphs is learned first. Then people move on to learning hieratic. All right. So what they do is they transcribe the hieratic into the formal glyphs. And I believe I can still have my cursor over here. Yep. All right. So the hieratic text is written from right to left. It's in this direction. So it starts over here and it goes to the left. And so you see the glyphs here the transcribed, I've transcribed them beneath here in the formal glyphs in the same direction, from the right going to the left. But the transliteration underneath is going from left to right because that's the way we read in English. And it would be very weird to write this transliteration going the other way. All right. So just so you know, this is written from left to right, the transliteration. But the transcription and the original are from right to left. So this word here, switch back over here, excuse me, majat, is really this first word right here, majat, which is this word here. Okay, majat. Just so you'll see what I'm referring to and follow along. Um, okay, so Imikat, since you had started to read now, by the way, when we pronounce these words, we refer to it as Egyptology speak or classroom pronunciations because this is a standard and it's never meant to be taken as if the ancient Egyptians spoke and pronounced these words exactly the same way that we do today. All right, so we acknowledge that and we always let others know. Um, but it doesn't prevent us from knowing the meanings of any of these words. All right, so we refer to it as Egyptology speak. So, Amy Kat, if you don't mind, if you could read the first line here.
Yes. Mejat net rek keperu nu ra seker apep.
All right. And on the left, I have the translation up there. So we have the original, the transcription, the transliteration, and then the translation over here on the left. And so it means the book of knowing the transformations of Ra and overthrowing of Apep. We said that several times. So that's what we see here. And can you read the next one?
Jed Medew neb ercher Jed F. Mket keper F.
Okay, now, just a quick question, side note. Do you see something familiar in that line?
Yes, I see my name in there actually. Mket or Imiket.
Okay, and what does it mean?
It means follow or after or descendant. And this in this sense we're using it to say after. Something that follows after.
Okay. So the translation is words spoken by Nebuchadnezzar, and he said after he manifested. All right. So let's go to the next line. Third one.
Inekpu keper keperi.
All right. And the translation on the left is I am this, Inek Pu, which is I am this, who came into being as the creator. And then let's go to the next two lines.
Keper ani keper keperu.
Which means when I came into existence, existence itself came into being. Now that's something that is may seem weird that when I came into existence, existence itself came into being. But you know think about that for a minute and go to the last one we want to talk about.
Keper keperu neb mket keperi.
Okay, you see that imket again after something. So it's all things came into existence after I came into existence. Okay, so the words are being put into the mouth of a god called Nebuchadnezzar, and he's a priori to other things coming into existence. Nothing came into existence without him coming into existence. And so a lot of these things may sound familiar to those if you're of the Abrahamic belief systems, the biblical narrative of creation, the Quran, when it speaks and give characteristics, attributes of Allah, where it says nothing would exist if Allah didn't create it. La ilaha illallah. Nothing would exist if Allah didn't create it. And this line is eerily similar to that. Nothing came into existence until I came into existence. But it says all things came into existence after I came into existence. Okay, which sets this the speaker as a priori to everything else. Okay, so this is the book that I'm referring to in terms of my recommendation. Whenever anybody asks me, say, "Well, Joe, what book should I get that kind of tells me a lot about Egypt and so on and so forth, especially the things that we cover and everything," I always tell people, this is my first book I recommend to people, African Philosophy by Dr. Theophile Obenga. In this book, let me see, how many pages is it? It is over 600 pages, and it is exactly 671 pages. So it's a thick book, but it is a good read. It is worth it. Get it. If you can get your hands on it, get it. Go to Amazon, look for it online. Get it if you don't have it. And if you don't have it, shame on you. If you're new, then hey, I'm gonna give you a pass. But if you've been subscribed and tuned in to what we've been doing for a few years, shame on you if you don't have this book, because I tell people to get it all the time. But so this book is full of primary sources. So what Theophile Obenga does in this book is he takes primary Egyptian texts, and based on subject matter, he shows the transcription, the transliteration, the translation, and then he gives commentary on each one. So every one that he covers, he does that with. All right, and there's a lot. Like I said, this is over 71 pages. And so this text that we just shared from E.A. Wallace Budge is one such text that he covers in his book. And unfortunately, I have the physical copy, so I'm just showing you the cover on the screen. But I want to read some of his commentary, and then we can have a discussion about it. All right. So let me go back. I'm gonna go back to the beginning here. So this is what Obenga says. Well, first he gives the prominence of the papyrus. That's given the date where it was found and so on and so forth. So here's what he says, and this is coming from page 63 of his book, for those who have it. So reading, it is an eminently philosophical text, replete with highly advanced conceptual strategies based on logic and dialectics, no less, the preeminent resources of reason. A careful reading of this text reveals a skilled author at work, taking deliberate care to meet the demands of strict conceptual reasoning. And I want to stop there for a second, because the other day someone had asked me, and I get asked this quite often though, how did the Egyptians know what they knew? How did they know? Or some people may ask it differently. They say, well, did the Egyptians tell you? Like, did they tell us? Did they also write down how they came up with these ideas and these concepts? And that's a hard question to answer in a short period of time, because the way that Africans across the continent, several different community and population groups, there was a shared or very similar between each a certain pedagogical method of transmission, of transmitting information from person to person and generation to generation. And what stands out in that method is what we now call today figurative expressions, figurative speech, figurative writing, using literary devices such as similes, hyperboles, metaphors, analogies, symbols, and all of the other different tropes that we find and we still use to this very day. Okay, that was the business of the day in historical and ancient times. And so, without that understanding, it's hard to really expound and explain what the Egyptians said about how they came to these ideas and concepts and theories and so on and so forth. All right, but as I just read, Theophilo Benga is laying that out, that this is a highly advanced philosophical text, and it's based in logic and dialectics. Okay, logic is at play here. All right, not just the passive way we say logic. Um, you know, when we talk, in everyday. No, this is actual like logic, and people don't need to understand that logic is a domain of mathematics. Okay, unlike what most people believe math to be, a lot of people think math is just adding numbers or manipulating numbers, whether you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, working with numbers. People don't really appreciate and understand that math, that the numbers are just symbols of things, but math itself is really the study of logic using the rules of logic. So the entire field of logic and its rules, both together, is what composes or comprises mathematics. The numbers are things that tools and things we use, these symbols that we use, formula and things. So anyway, to move on, in the book, Theophilo Benga breaks down key terms. So he'll break down the key terms like Kepler, and the different forms of Kepler. So now notice that we see the first word here, Keperu, and then we'll see. Let me pull my cursor here. We see Keperu, which is here. We see Keperu, and then we'll see Keper F here. Then down here we'll see Keper and then Keperi. So Obenga goes on to kind of differentiate the explanation of these different forms of the same word: Keperu, Keper F, Keperi, Keper Keperi. All right, but I'm gonna skip that and go back into his commentary. So he goes on to say, from the moment it exists, that which is. So what Theophile Obenga does is calls this priori entity that's before creation. He calls it that which is. Okay, so when you hear me say that, that's what he's referring to, that which is, because there's no other way. It's like one of those situations where we say, for lack of a better word, that which is. Okay, because we don't want to put something on it. So he says, from the moment it exists, that which is causes being to come into existence. It does this without mediation, in a sort of sudden epiphany. It does, sudden epiphany, epiphany of being in its very manifestation. For that which is to be means to really exist. It is through its own power, which is the word ba, its own energy and movement, that which is comes into existence. That which exists engenders itself from itself. And so he's explaining the first few passages where he says, no one worked with me. I came into being from my own movement. I did this myself. I brought myself into being. All right. That's the true definition of self-created. All right. To go on, I'm quoting a Bing again. It is the absolute, that which exists by itself from the beginning, being the only one in a state of being existing even before the primal gods themselves, before creation, before the things desired and willed by the one himself. He is one, the only one, able to exist in the time before. And the time before is referred to as Impauta, the first gods, Netcheru Pautiu. And we can discuss those terms later. So we go from oneness, the multitude was to emerge in a dialectic of the one and the many. And so then he quotes the text again. He says, and the multitudinous ways of being were born of the existent. And so it goes into that which is causes the other modes of existence to come into being through love, which is meri, the word meri, and through its own will, iri, which means to do or willing something. Being alone by its own power. Being is absolute. It is also love and will. So these are the things that existed prior to creation. All these actions that's attributed to this deity prior to that deity itself coming into existence, therefore bringing existence into existence. And I know that sounds intuitive, and possibly weird to you, but I'm gonna connect the dots in a second. Being is, in addition and above all, reason. I'm quoting a Bing again. Being designs projects in its heart, the ib, that is to say, in complete lucid consciousness. First, reason encompasses the entire design. Then the creative plan presents itself before the creative one in front of it, completely visible with no confusion. Creation is a clear concept, neat, distinct, unambiguous to the creator, who is absolute love, will, and reason. An active energy, the very essence of efficiency, the master of the whole. So then he goes on to say, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't have it on the screen, and I know it's difficult to follow when I'm reading and you can't see what I'm reading. But just to go on a bit further, he says the ancient Egyptians called creation Sep Tepi, and you may or may have not heard of that. Sep is a word that means moment, and Tepi is from the word tep, very similar to our word tip, T-I-P, the tip of the iceberg, the tip of something, which means the top or the first. And so Septepi means the first moment, or as a lot of people will say, the first time. So the first time, it was an event preceding all others. It was not only merely a first event, it was radical as well, one of a kind, set in motion by the love and will of that which is itself, existing before all others absolutely, a sort of elder of elders. Through creation, the existence of what is gets multiplied, becomes a fecundating a fecundating process and is diversified. So in other words, that which is comes into the world as all the things in the world and the world itself through a process of multiplying of itself. So this is why the emphasis is placed on being alone, being one, not having anybody else or any other thing in existence, and then it itself manifests in existence, bringing existence in existence. and then from there it multiplies into a multitude of things. All right. Where I leave off at. Okay, creation is a general event that produces all that is. It does not, however, create the demiurge who antecedes its actions. In other words, exists before creation. The demiurge exists before the designs and plans emerging from its heart, its beneficence, its reason. Creation is an enterprise of beginnings. It is also, in a sense, proof of the existence of what is. And he quotes the text, I am, therefore existence is. End quote. For what is, to demonstrate one's existence means to cause, which is the word iri, to come into being other modes of existence. It means to create, to produce. Thus, humanity endows the demiurge with sentient faculties. The demiurge uses its mouth, because you saw a mouth in the text. The demiurge uses its mouth, its hands, its heart. Note that for the ancient Egyptians, the heart was the seat of intelligence. Now, let's pause there for a second. When you hear people say that, just as I just read, the word for heart, or the glyph, the heart glyph itself, is a glyph, a logographic glyph for the word ib, which means the mind. So it's the mind is the seat of intelligence. And so some people may take that literally and think that the Egyptians and other people thought that the brain or the mind was actually in the organ of the heart that pumps in our chest. And that's not the case. Okay? Just so we're on the same page. The heart was the seat of intelligence, reason, and intellectual perception. What is conceived in the heart is uttered by the mouth. That is simply saying that what comes forth out of your mouth first has to be conceived in the mind. You know, you think something in your mind, then you say it. It doesn't work the other way around. Let's see. I'm trying to see how far I want to read here. So let me just read this last paragraph that I'll read for tonight. In the beginning, therefore, this is from quoting a Binga again. In the beginning, therefore, was reason, followed later, and only then by the word. Now, see, that's the same process we have now. Before you speak, you think. And your thinking is supposed to include willing and reason, etc. Before causing palpable existence by pronouncing the actual name, which is the word Ren, of that which is, invoked the existence through the power of the word, the efficacy of creative utterance. The demiurge first conceives what is to be. So I'm going to stop there from Obinga's text. Now, he has a lot of commentary that goes on and on that really does a good job of laying some things out. It's just that for time's sake, I'm not going to sit here and read it to you all, because I just want to kind of open. I want to have a discussion. So now, switch my screen back real quick. Go back to this text here. So what I want to point out though is this description of this entity that the Egyptians refer to as Nebuchadnezzar. They put these words in the god of Nebuchadnezzar, and the word Nebuchadnezzar, by the way, it means Lord in regards to the limit. Neb, owner, possessor, master in regards to the limit. Jur, the word jur is a limit, a border. And so this deity who is Lord of the limit is saying these things after it comes into existence. But notice that the book is called the Book of Knowing the Transformations of Ra, not the Book of Knowing the Transformations of Nebuchadnezzar. So you'll see how the Egyptians played on the names to further elaborate on what they conceptualized. How Ra, in essence, Ra is that which takes itself and multiplies itself to become the things in the world and as the world itself. Okay, Ra, you'll hear Ra, you'll hear or read story where you'll read the deity Atum is given these functions, Nebuchadnezzar in this text, and so on. In some texts, Ptah, and then combinations thereof. But these are done to further elaborate, to further explain, and to show the nuance of function for these different deities. Now, I keep saying deities or gods and these goddesses, and then people think religious or spooky or beliefs. But this is part of the pedagogical method of indigenous communities in the past. They would personify natural occurrences and the explanations of those natural occurrences and phenomena, and their explanations of how and why they are what they are. They would personify all of that in the form of deities. There was nothing spooky about it. This is the method of documentation for that day and time. So, bringing all this up to today, when you hear scientists talk about the origin of the universe, they will transparently admit that they don't know the origin of the universe. They cannot know. There's a lot of YouTube videos with prominent astrophysicists, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think Peter Cross, and others. I mean, there's a lot of others. You know, we mentioned the ones who are more noticed and known, but it's all over in astrophysics and astronomy, et cetera, where they will tell you that they don't know the origin of the universe. And the Big Bang Theory, its explanatory power is limited from today going back to what's called the Planck epoch. Anything before that is a blank. They don't know. They don't know how long of time before the very beginning, what they can speculate about the birth up to the Planck epoch. Now, it's within a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second in terms of the Planck epoch. But prior to that, they don't know. And so what they're talking about an event of where space itself, see, when people hear the Big Bang, most people will think of, okay, an explosion, a big explosion, hence the name Big Bang. So a big bang, a big explosion where something just exploded and started to scatter and spread out in space. So, and anybody thinking that way, they'll be absolutely wrong. That is not what the scientists are describing or attempting to describe. What they are describing is the expansion of space itself, not something in space that's spreading out, but the expansion of space itself. And so if you think about it, even in modern terms, without personifying it and calling it and naming it, aka a god or a deity, it's the same thing. They're saying the same exact thing. Where this unified something prior to the known universe, prior to creation, it comes into the known universe, or it comes into existence, and from it, all other things come into existence. From it. And so there's never a separation from between it and everything else. Everything that comes into existence is that entity multiplying of itself. Because remember, the text said that existence came into existence after I came into existence. And it uses the word Asha, and I wish I had more of the text already transliterated. It has the word Asha there. As a matter of fact, let me, if MK, you could find that. Let me just show you the word here. So let me just switch up. You have it on the screen? Okay, you have your cursor pointing. Okay, great. So the word Asha, this is the word that means many, a lot, many. And so it's the multitude. It's the multitude, the multitude of modes of existence. That's what this entity brought. And so they're one and the same. And so you may hear us describe it this way, that if we're going to use the word God, God, the ultimate God is existence itself. And there's nothing that can exist outside of existence itself. And so another way of people describing or trying to refer to it, they call it nature. Nothing is outside of nature. And so then you may hear, a few people may argue back and forth about that, this word super nature or supernatural, where something happens or comes from or out of anything beyond. The word super is above or beyond nature. And that concept is not fitting in the minds of people who document things in this way, like the ancient Egyptians. They didn't have a concept of anything supernatural. To them, it was no such thing as supernatural. Everything came from and out of existence itself. So to them, the equivalent of what people try to put on God, like when you say God to the average person, most people, even if they don't practice a belief system, they're influenced by one at any rate. So when you say God, even if people don't go to church, they don't believe in the Bible, they don't believe in the Quran or none of that stuff, they can even be atheists. When you say God, what's invoked in their mind is the Abrahamic God with those three main attributes, the three omnis: omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, so omniscient, meaning all powerful, all knowing, and in all places or everywhere. Those are the attributes they give to God. But what's weird is that when you read the Bible and when you read the Quran, when you read these holy books of the Abrahamic belief systems, although they describe their God with those three omni attributes, when you read the stories in the books, that God doesn't that God doesn't fit those attributes, because God hovers over the face of the deep. How can you be everywhere but yet hover over something? That makes no sense. How can you be all knowing yet you're asking questions? Asking Adam, where are you? Did the serpent tell you not to do this and do that, whatever? And then he's trying to find out things all throughout the Bible. And then being all powerful, that's not reflected in the Bible. God being all powerful. So, and I'm not trying to turn this into a Bible thing or at all, but my point is that not the characters as the stories describe them, but these three attributes, these omni attributes, If we were to give those attributes to something and put them in the hands of or the mouths of the ancient Egyptians or even other communities on the continent, that would be existence itself, because that's the only thing that's true. Existence itself is everywhere. Existence itself is all powerful. Existence itself would be all knowing, because existence itself is everything. If you are everything in the world and as the world itself, then you have empirical knowledge of all things, because all things are you. You see? And so that's what we keep arguing and trying to let everyone know that God is existence itself, if we're going to use those terms. But the Egyptians didn't um, say it this way. They explain. They tell you that everything comes out of Nu, Atum. We got Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, and so on and so forth. They show you how things come into being, this unfolding, this evolution or this transformation process, and how creation is always happening every day, all day. Creation is not an event, a static event that happened in the past and that's it. Creation is a constant process, always happening. Transformation is always happening. Kepler is a all the time happening phenomena. So anyway, MK, you have anything?
Just one thing, while I think you were talking about the, having the attributes of nature, and as opposed to having this particular definition of God that doesn't fit those three attributes that we normally know with the Abrahamic God and things of that nature. And that reminded me of, I'm trying to find it here, where it was talking about creating all the different attributes. Yeah, here. So it was talking about laying a foundation in Ma'a, or which as order, and and things of that nature, and then it made every attribute or every form that could also be translated as every form or every shape. So it's like talking about different attributes of different things. That kind of, I thought that was important to note.
Okay, definitely.
And also to emphasize what you were talking about while reading from Theophile Obenga, the three different ways in which creation was being done, with coming from the mouth, where we have it here, where it was like creating everything into coming, everything came into being, was coming forth from my mouth. And then I think you also mentioned the hand. Let me see where we had the hand. And then here, he had union and clench with my hand, and I joined myself in embrace with my shadow, and I poured into my seed, into my own. And that's when it was bringing everything into being. And then you had, you mentioned three. I forget what the other one was, but I had it. And from the ib, from the mind, um, let's go back to that, just so that we have that. Those are I'll try to remember the pages. Is We definitely went over that. Just let me see. I think it was right here. So I worked a charm upon my heart, or with my heart, or with my mind. We usually put that at ib. This is what Sibawuja was talking about, the glyph for the heart or the mind, ib. So this is where he's talking about the creation with the heart, and laid the foundation and created every attribute. So yeah, those are actually from pages 309 and 310, I believe.
Okay, excellent. So, so just to summarize, like I said, it's um, this particular text, the Book of Knowing the Transformations of Ra, is a text that I talk about a lot. and there's a lot to discuss about this text. Coming from the language and analysis of the language, from its grammar to its to the content and what is meant in it. But there's a lot of figurative expressions within it, no different than a lot of the other stories that are called myths. And so this is something that we have to just start to wrap our minds around, that myth or writing myths does not mean what we may think it means, like fantasy or fairy tale, where some drunkard on the corner just start writing something for no reason, no rhyme or reason. What we need to understand is that what we're calling myth is a pedagogical method of documentation. And as I explained many, many, many times, figurative expressions, it was the mode of that day. We call it figurative expression today. They didn't call it that. They invented that for recording, for documenting, for transmission from person to person and from generation to generation. That is how it was done. And so we have to take that into consideration if we're ever to understand these texts. And so it's very dismissive for people to read these texts or read translations and just totally chalk it off as spooky, or the Egyptians don't know what they're talking about. They just talking jibber jabber. It's just a bunch of beliefs and it's just a religion. When you hear the word just, religion, belief, and all that stuff, that's being very, very dismissive, and it's very shallow. And what I find is that the only people that do that are people who actually don't study these things. And I shared the other night a philosopher, which is a actual a prominent philosopher of Western philosophy, George Hegel, and he wrote a book called The Philosophy of History. He has several texts, and in there, in his day and among his peers, and we had just had to understand this. Anybody who takes classes in philosophy, you already are familiar with him, because there's a lot of discussions centered around him and his work and the work of his colleagues of that day and time, where they completely write Africa out of the history books in terms of contributions to the world. And so that attitude and that view and that stance about Africans permeates in the subconscious mind of many people to this very day. You can have somebody who claims to be pro-black, black power, Ungawa black power, RGB, and black African power this and black whatever this and that, but yet they have this Hegelite type of stance and view of Africans. And it's unfortunate because it's a scapegoat and an easy way out. And why I say that is because it's easy to take that stance, because if you believe somebody's out of their mind, you're not required to listen to them. You're not going to stand there and listen to or take someone serious that you already have in your mind that they're out of theirs, that they're out of their mind. So, for example, somebody who is drunk as all outdoors, you're not going to take what they say out their mouth serious. If you're going to listen at all, you're not going to pay attention. If you think somebody's just yapping and it's just out of their mind or crazy or spooky, you're just not going to pay attention, you're not going to listen, or you're not going to take them serious. And so this is the attitude that some people have with African concepts, African philosophy all across the continent. But that's the easy route. Because what that does is by you thinking that way, you don't have to put in any work because you already come to them as with a bias and say, that's spooky. I don't have to deal with that. You see, and that's how it works. That's how it works in a lot of discussions I see. And so, what I try to do, and I try to do my best, is to kind of break that up and put more considerations on the table to so that people can really appreciate what these indigenous people, and I deal with Egypt, so I focus on Egypt. So I kind of narrow it to Egypt, what the Egyptians really contributed to all of these discussions. And so one thing is, a discussion came up about cosmologies, cosmogonies, and the Egyptians are way up there with theories about the origin and birth of the universe. And so people need to appreciate it for what it is and not be dismissive about it. So I shared a little bit of that. There's a whole lot more to talk about in terms of that text. We could break down, why Nebuchadnezzar is chosen. Why is the word and phrase Nebuchadnezzar chosen? Why is Ra or these words put into the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar? Why don't they mention Ra in terms of those sentences, opening sentence? Why is the word Keper used so much? And then this seker, this plan, or senet, this plan being in the mind or the heart, how did it move? Why is the word kaibit used for shadow? That's what Budge translated as shadow. Kaibit. And the other text is the ba. What's up with the ba and the kaibit? And the ka? What's up with the other stories where you have Atum, whose name means finish or to complete, the completer or the finisher? Nu. Where did the Ogdods come in? We have the four pairs. Nu, Nunet, Hey, Hehet, Kek, Kiket, and Amun and Amunet, which is really Tenem and Timonet at first. And then it got switched over to Amun and Amunet. Where do they play a role? What is that describing? What about Heka, what they translate as magic? What about Hu, the authoritative utterance, the word that Obingo is speaking about, the word of authority, Hu? And what about perception, Sia? All these people, all these names I'm mentioning are gods and goddesses, but they're describing processes of the evolution, the birth and the evolution of the universe. And this evolution is constantly going on. And if you understand the Egyptians looked at creation as birth, then you'll understand Wehem, Mesut, the constant rebirth of things, because they don't see creation as this static event. If you talk to any Abrahamic adherent, they view creation as an event that took place, some people believe 6,000 years ago, if you want to use the Bible, or however many years ago, but they believe that creation happened and then that was that. And then, everything we're here, but creation happened in the past. The Egyptians didn't think that way. They looked at creation as happening over and over and over again. The creator, one of the functionary creators, Ra, gets reshaped every day. So the creator gets born again every day, renewed every day. Kepler shapes him in the morning. Then he goes, matures. Then he gets old. Then he goes back into the duat, only to be born again. So it's a constant cycle. So anyway, I pinned the link to come on the panel in the chat at the beginning. It should still be pinned. Let me make sure. It's pinned up. Yeah, it's pinned there. So feel free to join the panel. Feel free. Now I can pay attention to the chat. So let me give a shout out to anybody in the chat. And I started off by saying, when we started at 11 o'clock, and I know our good brother Osari Motep was live, still live, and so we didn't want to get started too late, so we started in hopes, Asar. People say that I'm MC Iron Lung, I'm long winded, but y'all don't know that Asari Motep is an undercover Iron Lung as well. So I tried to go live and kind of time it, anticipating him to kind of be on the wrap up, because I didn't see the whole show. I saw the beginning of his show, and it's very informative and everything. And I know people were tuned in, and so we started hoping that, okay, this is the we started hoping that, okay, this is like the after party, so people will, once he wrap up, then people will just kind of make their way over here without planning it that way. So oh, I actually spoke him up. I know his ears are ringing, his palms probably itching right now. Let me get him in here. All right, want to welcome brother Simotep. I don't know why I can't see him. He looked like he froze. He probably have to go out and come back in. Hope I didn't freeze. Can y'all still hear me? Oh, there he is. I think he's back. Got that Cricket Wireless and down in Texas somewhere. He got the outer net. He don't got the internet. he got that other net. Oh, you muted. I think you muted. I see you trying to speak. Nah, I can't hear you. Okay, I think he's leaving and coming back in. But anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, I was just saying, there's a lot that we could talk about the text, and when I go live like this, I don't try to dive into too far, because there's a lot of prerequisite discussions and information that everyone would need to know to really have a worthwhile discussion about these texts. So what I try to do is point out some things to spark curiosity, and to or feed the existing curiosity, so you can have some motivation to start researching, start learning about these things. So again, let me just share this and show this on the screen here. So again, this concept, not the scarab beetle itself as an insect, although the behavior of the scarab beetle is very fitting in these stories, and by that I mean the scarab beetle is known, or the dung beetle is known to make manifest, or bring into being a circular ball, and it does that by its front legs. Okay, if you ever watch videos of the scarab beetle doing this, dung beetle, it will shape the ball with his front legs and his head. Like, you may not see it, but the beetle's head has these sharp ridges on it, and it cuts and shapes the ball with his front legs and his head, and it pushes the ball with his hind legs. The scarab does not push the ball with the front legs. Now, I say that often to emphasize the fact that, let me put this shape on here, that when you see the ball at the top or in front of the beetle, it is not pushing it. It's shaping it. It's bringing it into being. That is a visualization, a visual motif to explain, or to bring into form the concept of coming into being, giving shape to something, giving form to it. Remember, existence and the perception of existence is all about form. Everything is about form when it comes to existence. The perceivable universe is about form. And so Kepler brings things into form. That's why the word Kepler itself means manifestation. It's translated as manifestation. It's translated as coming into being. It's translated as beingness. It's translated as evolution. Translated as create, etc., etc. Um, so this beetle is used to all throughout this text. And so I'm pointing out one, two, three, four, five, six instances just in the first line alone, where you see the beetle. Is to emphasize and drive the point home that there's a lot of manifesting going on and changes. To evolve means to change. And so if we read, we have Majat net rek keperu nu ra seker apep. The book or the scroll, really, because we know the Egyptians didn't have books like how we have them, but the Majat is a word for scroll, of knowing the evolution or transformations of Ra. Nu is of Ra, and then the overthrowing or the felling of Apep. I think we got a different. We had Asar Imhotep. Now we got Asar Imka. So Asar Imka, I'm gonna bring Asar Imka in, and welcome the good brother Asar Imka, ETM Hotep. You
ATM Hotep, Sonny, Aquas the Jet, Uncle Josh, Seneb, the couple of the year, the couple so dear to our hearts in the building, breaking it down. Y'all got me all excited over here when I hear y'all dropping the info on the universe. You know how we do. It's so funny. I just saw. I was just on the it's just yesterday over in the argument chat, and we I was given the Kalam test.
oh, the Kalam test. What's that? You got to break that down. What's the
You don't know the
Kalam test?
Kalam? Oh man, you got to do. The Kalam test checks to see if you believe there's a God or not, and so
Mm,
it fits our paradigm perfectly because you're dealing with creation and is the universe alive. For
mm.
other people, it doesn't fit their paradigm the same, so they start to have a little difficulty with it. Hold, let me pull it up here for you. See if you can Google it real quick.
All right, if you have anything that if you want to share your screen, just by all means go for it. It's the third button from the left. You have your mic, then your camera, and then the share. So if you want to share, go ahead.
Share screen. Okay, I didn't pull myself up in my. Here we go. So
All right. Hold on, let me get you on where everybody else can see you. There you go.
the Kalam cosmological argument. Where's the? Let me get the wiki version, just because it's easier that way.
When you first said Kalam, I thought you were talking about the brother Kalam who I haven't seen in a long time. I thought maybe you were on his channel and he put you in the hot seat or something. I'm like, what's the
No,
Kalam test?
you know, he pulled it up. Me and him. It was me, him, uh, the other brothers from London. We were on the chat with some of the Muslim ox, and we're actually on his channel when we do it. And he pulls up the Kalam rule, and this is when they're like, "Well, if you don't have your book, what would you? How would you explain your text?" I said, "We would use nature." And we bring the mythos because the mythos explain the nature. The mythos are the adumbrations of the truth in story form. And that's when we started to get into all that craziness. But here's the Kalam rule right here. These six, there's more than these six, but these six questions right here, they pretty much will break down what you believe. And so I always ask an audience what their thought process is concerning and does their God fit the paradigm? And if your God or if you're an atheist, if your universe doesn't fit this paradigm, you've got more questions to ask yourself.
Okay. So it's kind of small. I don't know if you could magnify that. I'm not sure if people can read that.
Had to flip my food over. And
Oh,
so,
oh. We don't want you
yeah, it
burning your house
starts.
down. Burn your house down.
A little smoky in here. So you hear that alarm
Hey,
go off. I ain't doing
hey,
the right thing.
you gonna pass the kit. You gonna fail the kitchen test. Talking about the kalam test, and then you gonna have to put out the fire test.
For real. So it
But
starts.
no, no.
Oh,
Before you say, it, I was wondering if you, can you magnify that? Can you zoom
make
in on
it
that?
bigger? Yeah, let me see.
Yeah, you should be able to zoom. Yeah, yeah. One more time. Yeah, there you go. Okay, I think everybody can appreciate it now. So, what was the first one? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Well, I'll let you go in. I'm just reading it.
Nah, go ahead. Read it to the people.
Okay, so it says form of the argument. The
Let me
most
flip my
prominent
food.
form of the argument. Yeah, we don't want you burned down, man. Um, the most prominent form of the argument, as defended by William Lane Craig, states the Kalam or Kalam cosmological argument as the following syllogism: everything that begins to exist has a cause. Number two, the universe began to exist. Three, therefore, the universe has a cause. Yeah, this is definitely syllogistics. Um, so then it goes on. Given the conclusion, Craig appends a further premise and conclusion based upon the philosophical analysis of the properties of the cause of the universe. Four, the universe has a cause. Five, if the universe has a cause, then an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists who, sans or without, the universe is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and is enormously powerful. Six, therefore, an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists, who, without the universe, is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful. And so it goes referring to the implications of classical theism that follow from this argument, Craig writes, and I'll just read this quote: transcending the entire universe, there exists a cause which brought the universe into being ex nihilo. Our whole universe was caused to exist by something beyond it and greater than it. For it is no secret that one of the most important conceptions of what theists mean by God is creator of heaven and earth. And then that's it. That to me that is the reasoning that becomes the default setting the moment that people can't explain what what this is all about, like even what the Egyptians explained. That's why it's hard for people to grasp the concepts that's brought forth by not only Egyptians, but you have other African communities and other communities off the continent of Africa. They explain um, this in a way that's different from that. Like that follows that logic flow. Okay, if the universe has a beginning, then it has a cause that's beyond the beginning, and so on and so forth. So what were you gonna what were you saying about it?
I was telling them that the whole universe begets. So anything that, if we start at the singularity, the universe is alive, and you come into existence because of it. So treat the universe as an entity. We don't have a problem with that in our paradigm because we see the universe as entities. Each celestial body ends up being some type of entity or some type of netcher. And I used to always say the Kapara moment. Um, Something is always being created by something else. On down to the basics, which we know you don't exist without a mother and a father. We see your navel button. And that's pretty much everything in the universe. And everything creates something else. So everything is generally alive. Everything is some type of God. As the coffin text tells you, it's coffin or the pyramid text, I forget. It says, I eat, I sleep, I urinate, I with my back, with my hind parts, I'm a Netcher through and through. And so what hasn't changed is the creative process, and what will happen to you as energy as you'll transform later on. What has changed is the concept of what God was in the first place. If you use the term God as a blanket term, um, and that's people's problem. They don't really know what God is. They don't really know what nature is. And so when we go back to the ancient text, it explains these things more in depth. Uh, when you go to the Aristeas letters, and it tells you, well, first we started Plutarch. When Plutarch tells you Amun, who in Greece is Zeus, because he's created from Amun. And then when you go to the Aristeas letters, when Ptolemy is writing to the Hebrews who no longer know Hebrew, they're speaking Greek, and so they needed an Egyptian translator to translate their text for them while they came up with the laws in separate rooms, about 72 of them, which the Septuagint testifies to. Um, he says, uh, uh, he says, our God Zeus, who is the universe, as Yahweh was built off of that. So they're telling you what God is back in the day, and then you see how it starts to change as you get into different faiths. You get into the different Abrahamic faiths, and then God takes on a whole new series. The Quran, when they tell you Kuhu Wallahu Ahad Allahu Samad Lam Yalid Walam Yalad Walam Yakallah Kufuwan Ahad, they make a contradictory statement about their God, and it kind of it doesn't it works for them. So it's not to attack any of our Muslim brothers, but they say he is Allah, the one, the only, the eternal, the absolute. That's how we should all think. But then they make the contradictory statement. He begets not, nor is he begotten, and none are like unto him.
Mm-hmm.
So when you deal with different cosmological and cosmogony and cosmogony arguments, you have things like, can God be separate from its creation? No, because at that time you present two different realities. You have a reality with God, and now you have a reality that's separate from him, that would exist without his assistance. So for those who think, godly, you know that that can't be, because in your mind everything is, I'm glad God woke me up today. Good, thank goodness I can sneeze, because that really, and if God didn't, right? So God is supposedly everything, so you can't present two realities. There's only one reality, which is God's, according to what you say, but you have contradictories in different texts. It doesn't correlate to other texts. When it comes to Sheikh Ahmadida presented a question. He said, can God kick you out of his kingdom? I think he said it to Jimmy Swaggart, I think it was, right? Jimmy Swaggart said, yeah. He said, where could he put you? He said, I, I don't. He said, God created hell, didn't he? Yeah, it's part of God's kingdom. He can't kick you out of his kingdom. So I asked the cats the other day, I said, can you get outside of your universe? No. Do you know any way to get outside of your universe? No. You're a prisoner of the moment. You're inside of what created you. And we call the universe the mind of Netcher in some circles. And so you'll never escape that mind as a human being. You'll never escape that mind as a celestial body. You can never be outside of God. and the universe created you. And in particular, because you are on Earth, the stratosphere thought you and brought you into existence.
You know, you said something interesting, um, that something I try to explain all the time is that the deities. It would be better if people started to look at these gods and goddesses or deities and deities um, as ontological and taxonomical labels, because even what you just said, right? Sheikh Ahmadidad asking Jimmy Swaggart, "Can God kick you out of His kingdom?" His first answer is yes, but then if you think about it, he would have to kind of say, well, no, because if God created everything and every quote unquote where, then how can God kick me out of anything? Because everything belongs to God. And but see, the reason why I bring up ontological and taxonomic, because the key is on how things are demarcated and categorized. So God, like in their mind, God created everything, but they relegate some of what God created as His kingdom, and then they relegate another part of what God created as hell, or not the kingdom. And so in His mind, yes, God can kick him out of His kingdom, but not out of His creation. So they kind of split. So they kind of label different things, which is a natural thing to do, and that's what the unfolding of creation is by the name. The Egyptians say Ren, which is the identity of things. The moment something is given a name, and matter of fact, it was in the text we just had on the screen, where the name of things are given to it to differentiate it from every other thing, which itself is an act of creation. Naming something, and a lot of that's a heavy theme all throughout the continent, where if you don't have a name, i.e., an identity, you do not exist. There's no way possible that a thing can exist without a name, and I don't mean a name like calling on it or spelling it. It represents the essential ID, that which makes it what it is, becomes its identifier, separated from every other thing, and that limiter put around something is what causes it to appear or to be able to be perceived or take form. And these different forms comes out of the formless, hence the act of creation, like things coming into being out of this formless thing called new, et cetera, et cetera. I think we got a SAR back. Let me make sure he's
There you go.
joined us, and I believe his mic is working because I can hear clicking.
Testing, testing, 1, 2.
Oh, he's
Yep,
good
we
money.
can hear him. There it is. All
Appreciate
right.
it, appreciate it. I was trying to say the first time I was on that I'm gonna leave and come back because it appears because I was downloading the show
Oh, okay,
that I
okay.
just did, which is a 3-hour show. So I guess the downloading and then trying to stream at the same time just put a strain on the
Cricket Wireless. I understand.
basically.
Cricket Wireless, Texas Outernet.
Now I can't complain about this internet because one, I don't pay for it, well at least directly, because it's part of the unit, and so I'm just on the Wi-Fi
Oh, okay,
here.
okay.
So, um, and which means I got to share it with.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
who knows how many people else is on?
Especially Friday night. Yeah,
Exactly.
they
So
probably
it
watching
is what it
Netflix
is.
and everything.
All that, which I'm probably gonna do. I got to work in the morning, so I'm just gonna relax with a Netflix and chill by
All
myself
right,
though.
well, we got 12 minutes, so I just kind of open up and just to give a quick summary, because I know you were doing your show. Like I was
Hmm.
saying, I started this show um, anticipating, because I tuned in, I was listening to your show, but then I was like, okay, at some point you probably wrap up. I said people treat this like an after party, and but anyway, well, all Emmy Cat and I did, we just shared a couple of lines out of the book of Knowing the Transformation of Ra,
Hmm.
kind of linking that to, yet it's another creation story, myth, but how it's worded it's very similar to how even still modern scientists explain the birth of the universe, the origin of the universe, to the extent that they can, up to the Planck epoch, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
And so, it's just a continuation of that series of discussions. I just wanted to share that. And I read out of Obenga's African Philosophy in his commentary about the same. And it's just interesting. And so I'm doing this so people can start to appreciate it more and not be a Hegelite and like those early philosophers who dismiss Africa altogether from even being able to conceptualize and think abstractly and probe and convert and to document concepts that are well thought out, well placed in logic and reasoning and deductive reasoning and so on and so forth, etc. So to kind of wake people up to really appreciate this, because it's a lot of that going on. I think you touched on it in your show about the view of the Dogons and the critiques and this dismissive attitude that scholars have. And so likewise in philosophy, because anybody that take philosophy, you hear about Hegel, um,
Hmm.
and his racist, what we call now, racist stances, and all his the colleagues with that. But that's what I'm seeing in the conversations today, even from those who will claim to be pro-black and black
Hmm.
power you to death. They still have that mindset for some reason. And so anyway, so I'm just doing this to kind of combat that, give a little pushback on that, so people can appreciate um, the high level of philosophical thought that these people had. I'm just dealing with Egypt though. So yeah, that's
Indeed.
pretty much it.
Yeah, that was the main thing, because again, we can go all day dealing with the Dogon, but first and foremost, like the same amount of dedication that you would have to put into the study of Egypt, you would have to put into the study of the Pale Fox and conversations with Ogotameli concerning the Dogon, and just in even all the other subsequent work in article forms, from the researchers concerning the Dogon, and it's not something that you can just get your first time reading. I'm not saying there ain't no super geniuses out there, but you have to come with a certain level of um, philosophical and and metaphysical and poetic understanding of like language and metaphor and symbol and how to read symbolic language and things of that nature. And if you don't have that, you can have a difficult time. And like it's interesting. So even though I didn't catch what y'all were talking about, I'm of course very familiar with the transformations of Ra, of the forms of Ra. And but remember, like, for the past few conversations, we were talking about this African concept of a primeval ocean, and how the emergence out of that, comes to different forms. So you have different articulations, but they seem to coalesce upon this particular concept. And so not sure if you are familiar, I'm pretty sure you are, with the PG Bowen, um, Captain PG Bowen of the early 1900s, who came and visited the Amazulu in South Africa, and was introduced by a Berber initiate into the Zuluism tradition. Um, and the articulations of their creation narrative, at least at that time. And I want to share what is this? Hold on, what's this?
Just real quick before you
Go
share
ahead.
what you just said. So Emicat has this pulled up where it
Go
says,
ahead.
I raised them from out of new. And that's within the text talking about how this single entity prior to creation is all alone. Nobody worked with him, so on and so forth. And prior to him raising anything or creating anything, which he later rose up out of new, et cetera, et cetera. So what you were saying, this watery abyss, and how everything comes out of it, and takes on attributes and form as the text
Exactly.
goes on to explain. But anyway, just wanted to show that.
Yes, and how in our previous conversations we even cited, modern astrophysicists who, in articulating where particles and things come from, discuss, these infinite fields and the emergence of particles as a result of the agitation and ripples of the field, right? And
Right.
so this is why I had the discussion of, and it's part of my arsenal in the book I'm writing on quantum field theory as African heritage. And so what I want to do uh is, how do you share real quick and let me know
Yep.
when it comes up, if you can see it.
Yeah, there you go. Captain PG Bowen.
Right. So again, this is an officer. He's an Irishman, who grew up, as a young boy in, or at least traveling to South Africa, and so he came some years later as an adult, and he was introduced to these quote unquote white Zulus, which come to find out are really just Berbers who have been in South Africa for many years. And when you read, for example, Credo Mutwa's in My Children, he shows even some cave paintings of, the people from North Africa who traveled down into South Africa by boat, and the conflicts that even some of the Bushmen had with them. But of course, some remained, and it was with the Phoenicians. So they understood them as the Phoenicians. But we know the Phoenicians, set up territories in Northern Africa, especially in Tunisia, and of course, they're the ones who kind of pioneered that, going from and settling up colonies around places, and those being the areas of trade. So like, they're with their boats, they would bring goods from one area, then load here and take some here and then load it. And so they built their own network. That's how they were able to get around. And so they found themselves in South Africa. And so there were some Berbers that stayed, but of course they came into the tradition of the Zulu. And Captain PG Bowen, when he came down there, came across these quote unquote white Zulus, but they were really Berbers. And so, this is from a text, an article that I wrote some time ago. So just kind of introduce the arguments. And so keep in mind that this individual, PG Bowen, was also part of the Theosophist, Madame Blavatsky, school, and a lot of the articles and stuff he written was, written for that. So you're going to find some of that language and some of that argumentation in there. So you're going to have to weed out what is Madame Blavatsky and their crew, and then what is indigenous Zulu. And so we comb through that in the text. But I write here, in August of 1927, an article was published in a Theosophist, an esoteric theosophy magazine written by Captain P.G. Bowen, an Irishman, titled The Ancient Wisdom of Africa. In this account, he recalls his interactions with a Zulu brotherhood, the Bonabakulu Abakimu, the brotherhood of the higher ones of Kemet, of Egypt. And so, where they began to teach him some of the wisdom of their tradition. At one point, he was under the guidance of Mandala Langa, the strength of the sun. And we know that a mandala is a word for strength, like Nelson Mandela, kind of from that same root. And then Langa, or Ilanga, is the word for sun, who instructed him on the nature of the creator, who the Zulu call the Itango, right? And Itongo is not only amongst the Zulu, but the Kosa, and even in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique. Um, and so now, I'm citing the text here where he's talking about kind of the cosmos and the universe. So we're going to have some familiar things. So remember, this was published in 1927. His initiations and stuff was happening like in 1911, between like 1911 and 15. So this is older information. So keep in mind that this is before, I think, Einstein's general relativity and the whole of quantum mechanics. Even though, because that the whole of quantum mechanics really sparks off as a result of Einstein. And so 1905 is his special relativity, and then the general relativity was published sometime later, probably around like I think 1914 or something like that. So somebody can look it up and correct me if I am wrong. But so in other words, none of this stuff could have been said to have been the result of them studying the scientific literature and then imposing it on the Amazulu. So understanding of what occurred, talking about this cosmology here, is best gained by the following conception. Think of the cosmos just before individuality began as a vast, amorphous ocean of mind and matter. Its surface ripples and upper reaches those planes of mind which touch on spirit, growing denser and denser downward till matter in etheric form is reached, downward till ether becomes gas, which may be likened to the mineral charged lower strata of the ocean, downward till gases become liquids or muddy water, finally into solids, for example, thick mud. The beginning of individuality in this cosmic ocean may be likened to the starting of myriads of tiny whirlpools under the force of a growing flood tide, extending deeper and deeper, till at last all strata were involved in the swirl. Thus, we have individual extending from spiritual mind to the physical plane. The one on the surface represents the birth of the soul. Its extension to the muddy depths represents the soul's descent into matter. The matter, in matter, the soul has reached a philion of its cycle, and now it begins its long return journey. By the process of evolution, it climbs slowly upward from mineral to plant, from plant to animal, from animal to man, through all grades and states of human development, shaking off slowly and painfully as it climbs the gross secretions gathered during its descent up through the lower mind to the higher. It climbs till at last its cycle's complete, emerges with the source, the Itongo. So the Itongo is the total of everything, the cosmic mind and ocean, aka God, and ceases to be individual, being one with all. Now, those who are familiar with the kind of the theosophic tradition knows that amongst the Greeks, they also have this notion, and it's probably where people will believe this initially comes from in terms of this descent or this transmigration of the soul. But this actually is part of Zulu indigenous tradition. And so when you read in Daba My Children, you get the different stages from the gross matter in terms of plants to animals, to reptiles, to human beings, and then to bird and to star phase. And then from the star phase, it starts the whole process over again. And so you get that in that text, which was published in 64. And so this we can corroborate with other Zulu stories that this is actually indigenous and part of their folklore, right? So it continues in talking about the source of the brotherhood's power. So remember the Bonabakulu Abasikimu. Of the source of power we wield, I don't even think I spelled that right, but anyway, the pupil can learn but little until he attains discipleship. So, the person who's curious, you only know so much until you're able to become a disciple. And it goes to the different levels of the stages of initiation, right? So of course, all information isn't given to just anybody. And this was essentially the primary argument that I was making on my channel concerning Walter von Beek and his crew in comparison to Marcel Griot, who went through initiations and even after his death was given a chief's funeral because of his association and his integration with Dogon community. But I'll continue. But let him ponder this much. I have likened individuality to whirlpools in the cosmic ocean, but all that ocean has not been cast into individuality. Between the whirlpools, myriad they though they may be, stretch wide, smooth spaces, identical with this in composition. Now, it can well be conceived that a whirlpool, by setting up minor vibrations within itself, may send out ripples through the smooth spaces, which will strike upon and affect some degree of the whirlpools. All the whirlpools are constantly doing this. Now, suppose a whirlpool to have gained power to control its internal vibrations and to send them pulsating through the ocean towards whatever objective it desires. Can you not see that it may produce upon the objective whatever effect it desires? Now, think of the whirlpool as being a man. It is not clear that by getting full control of the vibrations of his higher planes, he may dispatch through the cosmic ocean of which he is a part ripples of various kinds and intensities, which, according to their nature and strength, will produce effects of all strata, from the highest, which is of course the most sensitive, even down to the slime and mud of the depths. I give you this food for thought and bid you to digest it well. So we see here in this cosmic ocean that these ripples, or this articulated here as whirls, which also send ripples, is what become phenomena, individualization of phenomena. But there's gaps in between these individual whirlpools, and to where it's smooth in terms of the plane. And so it to understand like fully where this particular part is coming from, they're talking about the ability for the brothers in the brotherhood to communicate with each other without being in the same vicinity. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant. This is just part of the the conversation and the alleged abilities of these individuals. Now, I can find the same conversation and logic amongst the Bantu Congo, as told to us by Fukiao, and I can find this in the same tradition in the Daguerre, according to Malidoma Somé. But what's interesting and why I show this is because of this notion all human beings are spirals or circles. So I'm citing Malidoma Somé of Water and the Spirit. All human beings are circles. And then he goes into more of that. And then the same thing here that from Amadou Hapati Ba, coming from the Bambara and the Fulani, this body called Faris, where all beings are moving in a circle, spiral consciousness, or whatnot. And then we get to the Dogon, where he's talking about the pre-configuration of human beings according to the Dogon. It is said that inside the Po, which is the symbol of the smallest, and which I argue is their rendition of the philosophy of an atom, outside and independent of Greek philosophy, is an even smaller thing, which is life. And so life developed at the same time as its means of support, made of the blended elements. This development worked in the principle of a motion turning in a conical spiral. It is said when life increases, it increases by whirling, which is a repetition of Amma's first act, because that imitates how Amma came out of the egg of the world. And so you will see in argumentation the same underlying philosophic thrust, that out of this cosmic ocean emerges a spinning of some sort, which gives birth to individualization, And like all of this stuff is independent, indigenous, and in many respects, hundreds of thousands of years before they even knew who a European was. And it is these concepts which, in many respects, they're even entertaining now. So when we go back to the Zulu, you also have within that picture the idea of a multiverse, because you got to understand what a universe is according to astrophysics. And so a universe is just simply, the 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 area in which all things obey the same laws of physics. And so when we talk about our universe and how, we show those different emergences of, starting from the Big Bang Theory and the limitations, and of course it's also a spiral, a V, a Bantu V, if we want to call it. Like within that limitation is everything that is affected by the same laws of physics, because the laws of physics are all uniform. But you may have another quote unquote whirlpool in the greater cosmic ocean that has a different set of law of physics, which would equal a different universe, a different set of spin. And we know that all throughout the universe, spin is the dominant movement. Cycle, spiral is the dominant movement. And we see that all throughout African philosophy. And so when, that's why we got to take this stuff serious and, have pushback for those who try to dismiss and make it seem like Africans were just twiddling their thumbs, waiting for Arabs and Europeans to give them thought and civilization.
That's exactly how Hegel describes Africans. He said that they didn't. He talks about Africa as being childish,
Mm-hmm.
um, not capable, untamed, wild, and the whole thing. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until the Arabs, through he calls them in his book, he calls them Mohammedans,
Mm-hmm.
um, touch base and rub elbows with them, that they have any semblance of culture. You know, and when you read it, but if you read all of his works and early philosophy, it's all throughout the literature. It's all throughout the literature
Mm-hmm.
where these Africans. But now, what's interesting to me though is at the same time now if you like look at two chunks of history, the growth of philosophy and then the
Mm-hmm.
birth of Egyptology and the focus on Egypt, and then we start to understand why they were hell bent on not allowing Egypt to be African.
Yep.
Not to be African, and to really keep up that separation from any relationship with Africa. That's why they were dismissive about African languages,
Yep.
and they just lumped all the languages together. Create this so-called language filer, lumping things together. But when it came to Indo-European, it's like, oh, we're gonna go into the minute details of that. But when it comes to Africa, we just
Yep.
gonna throw everything
Yeah.
into these groups and
Exactly.
everything. And so just real. Oh, great.
Oh, I was gonna say that usually during that period, what you would get is, the perception would be that, all the, any kind of thought process that would go, that would be happen from these different cultures. I think how they would define them is just that Africans were very emotional, and it's just a lot of ramblings. Like in their rituals, they have so many rituals and ramblings that are very complex. So then they would not get deep into, trying to figure out what was going on with these things.
Yeah, I wanted to. So I'm sharing this on the screen here, and this deserves some more research though. But the Egyptian use of the word senti or senet, in this case it's senti ne, which is I have laid, or I have produced this pattern or this foundation. Reminds me of what you just described as this ripple in smoothness, which is to lay a foundation, which is to kind of create this pattern from which attributes, or as the text you read say, individualism kind of comes into play. And so when you think of new as an ocean that is inert, still, no movement, is in a state of inactivity. When activity occurs, it's going to create these ripples, which gives the metaphor of water and the waves and so on and so forth. And from there you get forms, and forms is a way of saying differentiation, which is AKA individuality, you know, and the whole nine. So it's just interesting how these concepts and the themes are. They may not be exact one for one, but the conceptualizations are the same, but how it's expressed is slightly different based on what's available, and their mode of transmission, and their form of figurative speech. But it's the same thing, and this is what people got to appreciate. And this is what I was driving home tonight, and in the last show, and I'm gonna keep on doing it until I'm gonna bang people over the head with this figurative expression. The whole thing is about figurative, like that which is figurative doesn't mean spooky or to be disregarded, dismissed, or chalked off as some crackhead just writing something. That was just the method. And our last show, I showed and proved, demonstrated where modern scientists not only do the same thing, but they advocate that they should do more of it. You know, metaphorized, like even the Big Bang itself. We know the Big Bang is not literal. Nothing big went bang. It's just the expansion of space itself. You know, the whole nine. You know, I discussed that, and I went through a couple of even not the most famous, but a very famous Carl Sagan. His what do you call it? The cosmic calendar. That's a huge analogy, metaphor, whatever, that he created to put us on par with the chronology of the universe and the emergence of humans, where he said that we emerge if the whole universe, from what we know of its begin till now, was put on a 1 year calendar, human beings would only appear at the last day, the last hour, the last minute of the calendar. That's metaphor. That's figurative expressions. And so, you know, we understand that today because our society allows us to kind of anchor it and gain that understanding. But when there's time gaps between the Egyptians and the Dogon, the Zulu, or whoever else, and our mode of documentation transmission, that's where that gap is, and people don't want to feel it. They don't want to put in the work. So they just very dismissive. It's easy to be a Hegelite, to dismiss Africa, than to really try to understand it. I'm seeing from what you said and what I saw of your show, to push back on the critics of this. We're really pushing back on that same mentality that should spill over. That's really what it's all about. And what's shocking to me, or what shouldn't be shocking, but it's crazy to me that people who claim to be pro-black and all about Africa, they may not even realize that they're actually that Hegelite type mentality, that same thing. You know.
Yes, exactly, because they're not, as I said in a previous conversation, they're not grounded in Africana studies. They don't understand. They think that Afrocentric is just a buzzword instead of a paradigm plus research methodology. And because they are not grounded in African culture, in African thought, they don't know how to handle it nor articulate why or just anything about Africa, period. It's just they can only identify with Africa because of the so-called racial connection, but they can't identify and connect culturally, and that's
Yeah,
the problem.
exactly. I don't know if you ever have a friend or know somebody who just don't read the directions. They'll buy something, don't read the directions on how to put it together, try to put it together without reading directions, mess it up, and then just end up throwing it away. That's that's what I see people are doing. They're not
Yeah.
trying to take time out to read the directions to get a full understanding of something. So instead, they want to play with it, break it, and then just ditch it. And that's what's going on
Exactly.
because people play with Egypt when it comes convenient. People play with Africa when it becomes convenient for the conversation, but then when it gets down to nitty gritty, they throw it away because they don't want to take time out to deal with it.
This is it's a phrase that originates with Dr. Malana Karenga, but it it's become part of the Africologist framework, and that is, you know, you have people who like to use Africa as a reference instead of a resource. And so in Africology, we look at Africa as a resource, as a source for paradigms and ways of being and values on which to ground ourselves to march forever into the future. And that is not the case with these individuals who can only use Africa as a reference, meaning that these people live over here and these folks did that, and that. But because they don't believe in their heart of hearts that Africans are capable of genius and philosophy and original thought and conceptual creation, that they stop there in terms of just being able to talk about, for example, political issues in Africa or just some historical events. And they point, well, these people lived here and these folks lived here, da 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 da, da, instead of using Africa as a resource. And that's the difference um, with this. But I
Yeah,
wanted to share and read this one uh, sentence before you move forward, because I heard y'all reading about myths earlier,
yeah.
and
Oh,
and
just
so
1 second, real quick. Asaram Ka. By the way, I forgot to mention I had muted you because it was some background noise, so I didn't know if you were trying to chime in or anything. Um, just if you did, you can mute yourself. But I'm definitely. I told myself we're gonna stop at 2, but it's 2:22, so we got 8 minutes. So
uh,
we're gonna we're gonna
uh,
reset the clock. Go ahead.
no, but Dr. Modupe Oduyoye, in a book edited by another Dr. Agdigbola on religions of West Africa, and he's articulating the nature of myths and how to at least properly look at them. And he says that myths are therefore hypotheses. They are constructed to offer explanations of phenomena. They are always literary hypotheses, not scientific hypotheses. They are poetic in style, hence the prevalence of personification of abstractions. In mythology, every abstract principle becomes an animal, a totemic ancestor, a human being, a human ancestor, or a divine being, a divine ancestor. And so they're not arguing that these are concepts that arise from scientific experimentation. These are hypotheses, but I would add to this and adjust it and say that these are hypotheses that are scientifically testable. And I also want to just show this image on, and we showed this before, um, and this is of Heru, coming out of emerging out of the waters. But one could argue that this is almost in the same symbolism as that individualization coming out of the lotus, in the canal or whatnot, um, coming out of this primordial lotus flower, and then of course myrrh representing the primal ocean, and we see the same thing with Tutankhamun, but it's still that same V, still kind of spiral sense, and so I would put that in the same category as what we saw earlier.
Yeah, and you brought up the image, the vignette of that that scene from the tomb of Ramses the 6th. And so last night, was it last night? Last night we had actually brought it back up and did the transliteration of the text around there
Mhm.
to hold to demonstrate and support all the things that we were saying, that you were saying, that we were saying,
Mhm.
how to identify us with creation. And anybody and their mother, even Stevie Wonder, can see or should see that in that tomb on the ceiling, it's the cosmic backdrop of Newt, the stars through the body and everything like that. And then you see several stars. You see six on one side, six on the other, 12 times 2, 24. And so I titled that show the birth of time, because it's talking about the
Mhm.
birthing of these timekeepers, these stars in this time.
Mhm.
So anyway, we just went through that text on that part, because the part you showed with the wasek,
Yes.
that shape, and that how the word itself means to broaden or to create space or space itself, but it's
Mhm.
protected by mehen, that snake. And
Mhm.
so we went into that a bit, and all that good stuff, and how part of his body goes below the horizon and it's unseen,
Mhm.
unperceived, all that good stuff. So, and I'm just saying, people really need to appreciate this, because for things 3 to 5,000 years ago and old, without the equipment we have today, they're pondering, imagining, conceiving, and documenting all of this stuff at a time where they didn't have refrigerators. They couldn't just walk to the
Mhm.
supermarket and had much leisure like how we have today. So it's, to me, it's real disrespectful to be dismissive of the genius of all these people. So anyway, um, that's all I have for tonight. I don't know if sorry, MK, did you want to unmute? Have any thoughts? Yeah, he probably ate, and the itis kicked in because he was eating on here. MK.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that it really pretty much summarize what you guys have said and what we've said throughout different videos on the different platforms, is that um it's very clear that when it comes to African studies. Oh, I think Sam Kerr is back. I'll just finish real quick so you can get a
Yeah,
chance
go
to
ahead,
talk.
sis.
Um, that these are not microwavable stuff. Like, people would really like, there's this assumption that when it comes to African things, you can just, quickly do them and understand them. Like, you just go in and just read this, and it's child play, and you can do it. And I would actually say, just from my experience, and this is why most of the time, even when people ask me to talk about like Lua stuff, I'll be like, be very hesitant, because even for me, just living in that particular culture, knowing the language and knowing certain things within the culture, I still know for a fact, with what I know and what I'm trying to figure out, is that I can't even just microwave, my culture. Like, there's a lot for me to actually learn and understand at the same time. So when I see people actually who don't speak any African languages, I haven't even tried to learn just a little bit of this, some of the words that they read when they try to understand whatever it is that is being said by these African authors. They don't speak the language. They don't even talk to anybody. They don't even research like on a regular. And they feel like, I understand what this author is trying to say, and this author is lying. Like, to me, that's just like, I can't even conceive how somebody would think like that, because even with, like I said, like my culture, I can't even just microwave it. Like, there's a lot for me to learn, even with the prerequisite stuff that I already have in place. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's even what troubles a lot of Europeans, and why a lot of people are very hesitant, even on their part, to study African cultures, because there's a lot of complex stuff. Obviously, things, not everything is documented by writing. Is documented, obviously, in different formats like oral tradition and things of that nature. But that's what I feel like, even for the Europeans, it becomes, because of the, there's certain nuances with this with African cultures, that you really can't microwave it. You have to take your time with it, and if Europeans who actually even take time can't even get it right for the most part, it just tells you that this is something that you really need to take time with. I just wanted to add that, so people don't think like, I'm gonna just come in here and slap these African things together and then tell people this and that. You gotta put some respect, a lot of respect on that, because because a lot of people to date haven't gotten it right yet.
Facts. I was going to add, because I had did the video on Otto Neugebauer's book, and I'm sure you guys will get to the Book of Newt and what have you shortly. When you start to get into the text and what it says, when it tells you where Heru rises, and it tells you the dew in the morning is the birth, is Aset birthing Heru, and then they consider it to be sunrise and things of that nature. It's just going to justify what you're saying right now concerning. I had did the video a while back, and then I had some brothers on the panel, and I was asking, I was like, do you know what this particular myth? And they, and when you start to get deep into the myth, there's so much to unpack that they discovered. Even if you, Otto Neugebauer made the statement that they had discovered gravity under the planets because they compare it to a Sar's hand lifting Heru up. And they say it under several things. And then when it's not a Sar's hand under it, as gravity does sit on, it sits under the planets, similar to that, not centrifugal force, but cyclical force, I believe they call it. They describe it like that. And the scientists had to give them credit for that idea. And they begin to start to unpack science based off of old African mythos. And you guys are uncovering that and discovering that and bringing it to the people. And I've been doing it as well. And it's just beautiful to hear. It's beautiful to hear when people wake up to their own and respect their culture, without question.
Yeah, the moment that if we get less and less people to just be dismissively say things like, oh, so and so, I'm speaking about people, are spooky, or so and so, that's just their beliefs, and they start, changing up that language, then we will have an effect, and so, and I know other people are sharing and doing the same thing, and that's good, because that's what I want to see. I want to see people to really just take a double step. It's not going to just be this easy piece of the cake type dismissive activity around here. Like, no, I just asked point blank question. I'm like, you really believe that these folks thought that a human being had the head of an ibis bird or a snake or a frog, or that they literally thought that H2O was the beginning of all things and whatnot, like literally water, or is it an analogy for the behavior of water, things like that. The Nile. Do you really think that they thought the Nile was blah blah blah? And I mean, gotta appeal to the ounce of common sense people have. So anyway, but it's 2:30. Sorry, I don't know if you had anything to wrap up with. Nah. All right. So peace to the chat. I know it's late, but it is Friday. I know people probably go Netflix and chill. And probably get a few or at least an episode of something in. I still haven't seen Spider Man.
Witcher.
Oh, I'm done with Witcher. I've been there, done that already. I done
You did
binged on
season
Witcher.
2? I ain't
Yeah,
watched season 2.
I went all through that. Witcher. I'm caught. I like literally. There's nothing for me to watch that interests me. I binge because see I have a habit of binging. I'll wait till the episodes stack up, and then I'll just watch them all in like 2 nights, 3 nights. I watch them all. I watch a whole season in 2 days.
Worse than
2
me.
nights. Cause that's messed up how they do those shows where you gotta wait a whole week for the next episode. I can't do that. Anyway,
No.
so I appreciate everybody
Me
tuned
too.
in the chat. I gave all the shout outs earlier and everything. But and make sure you subscribe because we do drive-bys and out of the blue broadcasts. We go live, based on subject matter and if we have time. So, you got to keep up. We try to give a little bit of forewarning, maybe 10 minutes. Got to do better with that. But, Emicat.
Oh yeah, real quick. And I've put some links on it on the chat. Asar M. Carr, who is a guest with us today, he has his own YouTube channel where he talks a lot about this kind of stuff. So definitely subscribe to his channel, hit the notification bell on that, and I've also put Asar Imhotep's channel in there. You already know. I think all our viewers already know that, but just in case there's some new ones watching, Asar Imhotep's YouTube channel is also in the chat. So subscribe to that channel as well. That's also very, very informative as well. That's one of the channel where you really want to watch one video per weekend, because they are long and very, very in depth.
And I told people earlier, sorry, you like the quiet as it's kept MC Iron Lung. Like people like I'm the overt one. You the hidden MC Iron Lung.
Well, that's why I rarely do shows. I mainly do interviews, so I can keep them within like an hour and a half, and then
Right.
every now and then I'll do a lecture, which would be like 2-3 hours to kind of balance it out. But
Yeah, I try to be 45 minutes, and my 45 minutes is 2 hours. So I got that ratio.
mhm.
But all right, so appreciate everybody tuning in, and then make sure you subscribe. Like I said, if you enjoy the conversations we have, and check out our archives and everything, you enjoy it, thumb up the videos that you like, ask questions in the comments. I do read through the comments under the videos. I always try to go back and read through them, and chime in and answer any questions, or address anything people say. So definitely do that. And it's Friday night, so I don't know where the after party is at, but hope everybody enjoy themselves and stay safe. Peace.